All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Terence Crawford is stalling out Errol Spence and Shawn Porter fights, hoping that they will move up to 154 and therefore allow him to get the WBC franchise championship. That is according to a very respected channel, BFTB, and supported by things that were said by Bob Arum himself. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, the subject matter of this video is Terence Crawford in the welterweight division. As of right now, Errol Spence Jr. is the WBC and the IBF champion. Yordenis Ugas is the WBA champion, and Terence Crawford is the WBO champion. Most right-minded individuals would say, oh, we just need a couple fights, two specifically, to get an undisputed champion. Errol Spence Jr. is going to fight Yordenis Ugas, who the winner of that fight, which I believe will be Errol Spence Jr., will become the 3-belt holder, and then Terence Crawford will be there with the WBO. The only problem is that Terence Crawford is saying that he doesn't want that fight. He doesn't care about that fight. He's past that fight. He doesn't care. It may be 50-50 split. They still may not make that fight. Now, does that make any sense to regular boxing fans? No. And in fact, it's enraged a lot of boxing fans and a lot of people that were formerly Terence Crawford's supporters. Because the only justification that you have for this is that Terence Crawford is just ducking and he's scared to fight or whatever. But there was a video that came out today by BFTB, and I definitely ask you, and I will share it on my community page, ask you to go watch that video and listen to the audio that's played in that video. In that video, Bob Arum is heard saying that he can envision a time where Errol Spence Jr. moves up to 154 and Terence Crawford then will fight for the WBC franchise belt. Those words, I remember the conversation because the conversation really was about, the subject matter of that conversation was Vasily Lomachenko, Teofimo Lopez, Canelo Alvarez in the franchise belt. What the franchise belt is, the WBC has a franchise belt where that fighter, you have to ask to be designated as the franchise champion. But if you are the franchise champion, you no longer have mandatories, which means you can fight whoever you want to fight, right? But what's most illustrative to me is the fact that he said he can envision a time where Errol moves up and Terence Crawford fights for the WBC franchise belt. Well, that is not the same thing as saying Errol Spence Jr. He can envision a time where Terence Crawford fights Errol Spence Jr. and then is designated the franchise champion based on what he does. He says that he can envision a time when he moves up. Now, what does Bob mean, envision a time? I suspect that means plan. Plan for a time. Oh, it could play out like this. Errol moves up because he has 3 belts and Terence won't fight him. Because who's going to pay for the fight? Have you ever heard of Bob Arum being involved in negotiations that have drug out for 6-7 years? Like Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, when the rest of the world was really aware that that was the big fight? I'm telling you, Bob Arum is the Grinch that stole boxing. Without a doubt, because he would do that. And why? Why? Think about what Bob Arum and Top Rank's interests are, and look at what they've done in the past. Look at what they have at 135, and look at what they have at 140. Look at what they did to get total control of 135, and look what they did to get total control of 140. And you would have to suspect that they would do the same thing to get control over 147, which they have to do because their fighters from 140 have to move up. Jose Ramirez cannot be at 140 pounds forever. He has to go to 147. He's a big guy, and he only has a few more fights at that weight class. Same thing for Josh Taylor. Same thing for Teofimo Lopez at 135, who will be moving to 140 and will be at 147. So I suspect that Bob Arum envisions a time where he will be able to take over the welterweight division with the influx of his fighters coming up from 135 and 140. And what better way to have one belt than to have Terence Crawford be a franchise champion? Because franchise champions mean what? They mean in-house fights. Because that is what you get when you do not have to fight mandatories. A mandatory could be forced to a purse bid where you have to bid on it and a rival promoter can get the fight, right? Like what happened with Teofimo Lopez at 135. If you understand the business of boxing, you'll see that Bob Arum is not going to be interested in one fight with Errol Spence when he can get multiple fights between Terence Crawford, Jose Ramirez, Josh Taylor, Teofimo Lopez at 147 when Errol moves up to 154. Keith Thurman is towards the end of the twilight of his career. Danny Garcia said he's moving up. Shawn Porter is towards the twilight of his career, and so is Manny Pacquiao. To me, that looks like planning to me. So if you know you have to move these fighters up from 135 to 140 and 140 to 147, why would you give the one bit of foothold that you have at 140, the WBO belt, why would you give that away? Or why would you risk that against a guy like Errol Spence, and then Errol Spence has total control of the belts? And guess what else happens? If Errol Spence has total control of the belts and he moves up, then all of the belts are up for grabs. There's no individual person that has a belt that can say, oh, I am the champion of this division, right? So if you look at it if you look at the scenario and analyze the scenario based off the words that Bob Arum used, you will see that there is a great interest for Top Rank in the Terence Crawford Errol Spence Jr. fight not happening, right? And let's take it back to Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford, once he got to 147, has out of his own mouth refused to fight everybody in the division. He has said with Shawn Porter that he wasn't interested in the fight with all. We're friends. Shawn Porter starts pushing the fight, and now, oh yeah, become my mandatory, and then maybe I'll fight you, right? Errol Spence Jr., I don't care about it. I'm past the fight. I don't really care about the fight. That makes no sense unless you look at what Bob Arum said about you can envision a time for Terence Crawford getting that belt anyway. Because Terence is never going to leave go up to 154. He's in his third weight class. At least this is my rationale. He's not going to go up beyond that weight class because he's a 147. He came up from 135 to 140, 147. Terence Crawford can stay at that weight class for the rest of his career, and that's at least another 3 years. At least another 3 years with a belt. The only other person that they have to be concerned about that doesn't look like they're moving up is Keith Thurman, right? So, and Keith Thurman may or may not ever get a fight with him because Bob Arum is not shy about freezing fighters out and not making fights with guys. Look at what happened with Regis Prograis and Josh Warrington. Regis Prograis and Jose Ramirez in that what was supposed to be a WBC tournament that turned into a coronation for Jose Ramirez, and where Bob Arum right after the fight is like, nah, we're not doing that fight, or I don't know when we're gonna do it. With Regis Prograis. I mean, come on, man. But anyway, great video by BFTB. Make sure you go check it out. Let me know what you think about it in the comments section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.